Hi there, my name's Alasdair Kennedy and I'm the Sociable social worker, and I give practical advice to social workers, social work students and those wanting to be social workers. And in this video we're going to look at decision making in social work. How do social workers make decisions? And in my own way as a sociable social worker, I'm going to give you some of my top tips. So stay tuned. So how do you make decisions as a social worker or a newly qualified social worker, and even as a student? Well, I'm a big believer in trusting your gut. And the fact is, when you're a new social worker, you will have to trust your gut. You will have to trust your emotions, and you'll have to work through your emotions while you're making those decisions. Later on, intuition will prevail. I'll give you an example of that. I worked with a family. It was a large family, and the man was in and out of the family all the time, and I just knew something was wrong. I just knew there wasn't something right. The way he was with the children were quite scared of him. They were a bit wary of him. Sometimes he didn't even know the children's names. Some of the children, it was 12 kids in the family. He was full of patter, and you know, I could have signed off the child protection visit because it was a child protection visit, but I decided to move it into long term because I just thought, my intuition, I just thought to myself, there's something not right. And then later on down the line, guess what I found out? He had another family somewhere across Scotland. Always trust your intuition. Another case that I had where I had to have a hypothesis around how we would work with the woman was a domestic violence victim whose husband I used to visit, and he was quite a small chap, and he used to sit up on top of the work surface, and then he asked me to sit down, and the kitchen table was a bit lower than me, and I was a new social worker, and what they say in Glasgow is I was just out the wrapper, so I think I was 3 months qualified, and I found that really unnerving, and I didn't know how to manage it. So what I did was I looked to my supervisor, and I looked in supervision about how I could manage those visits better. It was about studying people's reactions, how I would react to that, and I had to have that hypothesis before I went out, kind of change the power dynamic in that relationship. So for me, the biggest impediment to making good decisions and future decisions is looking back on decisions that you made that you thought were poor, and trying to reflect on them and saying, oh my God, I wish I'd done this better. What if I hadn't done this? Da 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 da. And I'll give you an example. I worked with a family who had had 4 children removed already. I had removed one of the children for adoption, and the woman fell pregnant again, had the baby, and the baby, it was in a high flats, I remember, and they were both drug users, and the baby was sitting in its every time I went, it was sitting in a car seat, and I used to always take the baby out, but I always used to be worried about leaving that house. Always worried about leaving that house. The midwife or the health visitor was saying to me, actually, we need to remove that child. But at that point, and this was in the 90s, we didn't have anywhere to put this baby. And I always walked out of that house thinking, what if I coulda, shoulda, woulda? And I look back on that, and it did prevent me in the future making the proper decisions. And I maybe snapped to judgment sometimes. So it was about not beating yourself up about the decisions you could have made. And you know, I was even talking to my wife about this last night and she said, you know, that baby now is probably in their late 20s, so you know, you can't beat yourself up about that, because what we ended up doing was we ended up leaving that child there. Things did get better, to be honest. Someone took over the case from me later on for family support, and things got a bit better in the household. Confirmation bias. Now, you probably heard that quite a lot, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but give it on Mr. Google and have a look. But confirmation bias is kind of what your unconscious is thinking. So for example, I'm adopted, and I have to really look at my unconscious, you know, my bias for some things like open adoption sometimes, because my adoption was closed. So I've really had to reflect on how I feel about the new trends in adoption, and how that can impact on the people I work with now, and the clients that I work with now, and the sectors that I work in. And the way to do that is within supervision and reflective practice. So I hope those top tips kind of make you think about the decisions that you can make. As I always say, always remember why you're doing it. You know, why are you making that decisions? That's the big important part from the 5 W's. If you liked this video, drop it a like please, and thanks for your support.